Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, everybody. Here from the Little Bear Meditation Center, north of the Arctic Circle. Tui and I will be here for just a little while longer, and then back to the south. We have one more program in the Ask program this week, and it'll be the Soul of Nations meditation tomorrow at 5 p.m. GMT. And then, as I said, it's quite likely that we will not be able to do the broadcast from a moving train. I'm not. We'll see whether it is possible, but I actually doubt it. So we'll give it a try. But I think with 3 dogs in a little cabin and an irregular internet, it's not going to be very likely. Let's just have we're continuing with the study of illusion. I kind of want to review what we learned about the first type of illusion through mistaken perception. I just want to read that without commenting on it because there was sufficient comment before, and then go on to do the second illusion and maybe the third source of illusion. We'll see how we go. But anyway, we're coming together as a group, offering ourselves to assist with the hierarchy and its intention to dissipate glamour. Basically, there's still so much glamour in all of us that if we achieve the right kind of dissipation in our own personal nature, it's going to help our groups, and it's going to eventually set an example in the world. So we know that we have to begin at home, so to speak. And wherever we may be, in terms of our ordinary personality location, there are, I guess, some 33 of us here, or 32, something of that nature. Our purpose is to come together as a group in a unified consciousness, and realize as well a still deeper type of understanding that we are one being with many apparent parts, but they are not really separate from each other. The great achievement of the perception of oneness is what we're aiming for, not as a platitude, but as a true realization, and that, of course, will overcome the one great heresy, as he says, the one great mistaken thought, which is the great heresy of separateness. So, excuse me, we sound the Om with declaring our willingness to work at this project in an ongoing and persistent manner. So I'd just like to welcome you, Alexandra, Anne-Marie, Annette, Antoinette, Ariel, Deborah, Frida. She's been here and off again. No, there you are. Frida, welcome. Gregory, Gretchen, Jan, Jean-Pierre, Joanne, John, Yopie, Karen, two Karens, Ritzka and Karen Johansson, and another Karin, welcome, and Laura, Leslie, Lona, Marianne, Marissa, Mariut, Natni, Nienke, Sandra, Stephen, Suzanne, or Susan, Tui, of course, is here, Urania and Zenaidi. Welcome to you all, and here over on the staff where we're trying to hold body and soul together. Thank you to BL and Michael, and also Tuya is over on that side. So we try to make this as useful as possible. I've begun to send to some of you the Hightail link for some of these programs. It's done on a fairly irregular basis at the moment, but it might be a way to ensure that you get it in as expeditious a manner as may be possible. I still have a few things to work out, and I'm trying to work out a little squeak in the electrical system up here, and I don't think it's going to bother too much in the webinars, but maybe it shows up a bit in the broadcast, and we'll somehow get that under control before very long. So welcome everybody, and let's do some thinking together before we have our meditation. Well, you know, all these glamours, they're somehow based upon the great heresy of separateness, the inability to actually perceive the unity of things, and even another step, the oneness of things. People who are locked into their separative personal consciousness do all kinds of things which harm the welfare of the whole. And, well, they're hardly aware that they're doing that, but we can perceive that the separative consciousness does not act in the interests of the whole. And so the glamour of personality, of thinking that the personality is that which you really are, it causes a great deal of trouble. I have a very brilliant friend who's along the third ray, fifth ray line, and he quite assures me with all of the certainty that the third and the fifth ray can muster that when you die, that's it, that's the end forever. But I'm working on him, and we'll see where we finally end up in our consideration. We met when we were 7 years old, and now we're all in our mid-70s, and let's see if pure reason can prevail. Okay, now, I think we're on the 90th program here and the 30th reading, and we have an academic reading because we are reading through the book. It was a rather long section because it was introductory, this number 1, and but somehow I do, some of you may not have been here, and without commenting on this, I just kind of want to repeat this and get us launched into the second way of that illusion demonstrates. This is the first way, through wrong perception of an idea. The disciple cannot distinguish between an idea and an ideal, between an idea and a thought form, or between an intuitive and a mental concept. This is one of the ways of producing illusion found most commonly among aspirants. The mental atmosphere in which we all dwell is one of illusion, and that we have to really take to heart. And since we are all, we should count ourselves as aspirants. He says to do anything else is really dangerous because it opens the door to separatism. So the several times this definition of an idea appears in the work. An idea is a being, incorporeal, without the usual form body, which has no subsistence by itself, but gives figure and form unto shapeless matter and becomes the cause of manifestation. Now I forget, where I took that from, but you can find, if you just look up the words being incorporeal, a being without a body, you will find it. It's mentioned several times. And always remember that there is a difference between matter, form, and spirit. And the second ray is the great form producing ray. And the matter is related particularly to the third ray. Now, there are tiny little forms that are aggregated in various ways by the form producing powers of the second ray, but in a significant manner, matter and form should be considered as distinct. And then, of course, there is spirit, the actor. Okay. It is also that mental atmosphere. It is also an atmosphere or area of conscious contact wherein thought forms of all kinds are to be found. Some of them are placed there by the hierarchy for man's finding. Some of them are men's thought forms built around ideas. Some of them are very ancient ideals and have been discarded, but still persist as thought forms. Some of them are entirely new and therefore not yet potent, but most attractive, and all of them have been created by man at some stage or another of his individual and racial development. So I suppose he's including hierarchy as man. The true fifth degree master is the acme of human development. Many of them, of these thought forms, are shells of long exploded concepts. Still others are embryonic. Some of them are static and stable, and many are in process of descent from intuitional levels. A few are still illumined by the clear light of the soul and are ready for embodiment. A large number of other thought forms are in process of disintegration, and some of these forms or embodied ideas are of a destructive nature owing to the type of matter with which they are formed. Others are constructive, and all of them are colored by some ray energy. A large number of these forms are necessarily built through the activity of the world of the personality, which is severely limited. Others are in process of construction through the agency of the soul, as well as the joint activity of both of these manifestations, personality and soul. Right perception, now that's the whole thing about this very first method of producing illusion. It's wrong perception that's getting us in trouble, is therefore essential for each mind functioning correctly. Aspirants must learn to distinguish between, you see, this is in giving us this first method by which illusion appears, he's laying out some of the ground rules. So it doesn't really hurt to repeat this. It's subtle material, and it has to make its impression in our consciousness. Okay, aspirants must learn, let's consider us as aspirants, must learn to distinguish between an idea and an ideal. Okay, and we're talking about the astral Buddhic connection there. The ideal is a sort of mental astral, and the idea is Buddhic and above. B, between that which is embodied, that which is in process of being embodied, and that which is awaiting disintegration. Now, unfortunately, we react quite a bit to those old reactionary thought forms, and they seize upon people and make a lot of trouble. Number C, between that which is constructive and that which is destructive. D, between the old and the new forms of and ideas, the old and the new forms and ideas. So, well, let's just say that we have ideas that can be represented in various ways at different times. Number E, between the ray ideas and forms as they color the higher presentations. And I gave the example of the different approaches to the yoga of synthesis. And point F, between ideas and thought forms and between those which are purposely created by the hierarchy and those which are created by humanity. We have the example of the 12 signs of the zodiac as ideas which are created by hierarchy and anchored on the mental plane and above. G, finally, between racial thought forms and group ideas, and hopefully we're not all going to be conditioned by the racial thought forms of the group into which we may be born at any one time. And he goes on and says, I could list many more differentiations, but the above will suffice to show the need for right perceptions. This is just sort of the what's what of the whole process. What are we really dealing with? Is it an idea? Is it an abstract thought? Is it a concrete thought? Is it actually an ideal involving the astral plane? What are we really dealing with when we consider something that we imagine is an idea, and it may be something quite different? Okay, so there is this need for right perceptions, and he wants to indicate the roots of the prevalence of the world illusion brought about by wrong perception. So that's the foundational factor, and I felt it would be worthy to continue and reread that just to give us all the foundation we need. The cause, let's see, where are we here? Whoop. Okay, the cause is an untrained and unillumined mind. Well, you know, we're all in the process now of training our minds and filling it with the light of the soul. And remember that hierarchy is the society of organized and illumined minds. So there is definitely a mental intuitive approach to hierarchy, and when we study with Master DK, we do take that approach. So the cause of this wrong perception of what's what are we really dealing with, is an untrained, unillumined mind. The cure is training in the technique of Raja Yoga. Now, we all know that Alice Bailey wrote a book called The Light of the Soul, and DK retranslated the ancient Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, a master who existed maybe 10,000 years ago, and he presented them to Alice Bailey and says, okay, and now you write the commentary. Here's my translation of the ancient sutras. Okay, so the cure is the technique of Raja Yoga called the kingly science of the soul, the kingly science of the soul. And if we could master Raja Yoga, we'd be doing very well. Even the masters are said to still read the third and the fourth book of the Yoga Sutras. That's how advanced it is and how much it refers to states of consciousness which are proprietary to the master and the higher initiates. Okay, all this results in the ability to hold the mind steady in the light, to perceive correctly, to achieve a right outlook, and to attain a right mental attitude. It was these right attitudes with which the Buddha was dealing when he outlined the Noble Eightfold Path, which took its birth from the fourth of the Four Noble Truths. It involves the reaching, now he's going to use another word having to do with the level of our point of tension. It involves the reaching of the right mental altitude, which means vibratorily, how high is our point of tension? Yes, I said altitude, my brothers, and not attitude. So obviously, this is one of those ponder on this statements. Okay, now we go on. The second method of producing illusion. And I like this one very much somehow because it seems to cover a lot of ground. The first is wrong perception, but now we have a mental activity through wrong interpretation of a presented idea. Now, you know, what do we bring to an idea to interpret it? Maybe an idea does descend. Well, probably is not going to descend directly. It's probably going to be a mediated presentation. Probably that will be the case. So anyway, through wrong interpretation, the idea, a vital entity, you know, a vital being, or a germ, the very root of living potency, is seen, in this case, through the medium of a partial view. And now you see how likely it is that people like ourselves are going to misinterpret ideas because our views so far are very partial. And when we study with someone like Master DK, we are expanding the range of our consciousness and our knowledge and our understanding. So our consciousness becomes, or our viewpoint becomes less and less partial and more holistic. But when you look at the normal level of interpretation of some of the profound ideas in the world, one can be quite amazed at how narrow is the basis for initial interpretation. Later, maybe it will improve. So this idea descending from the Buddhic plane or above is seen through the medium of a partial view. And that's why we must really study and meditate our way into a much broader point of view. This point of view, partial view, distorted through the inadequacy of the mental equipment and frequently stepped down into futility. It just is not going to have any kind of useful permanence in the world because of the manner in which it is understood and the manner in which it is stepped down into manifestation. In other words, someone may contact a really good idea, but what does that person, in terms of mental equipment, what does that person bring to the presentation of that idea? So, you know, if we can catch ourselves doing this, then we will have taken a step. Distorted through the inadequacy of the mental equipment, that's all of us, and frequently stepped down into futility. The mechanism for right understanding is lacking, and though the man may be giving his highest and his best, and though he may be able in some measure to hold his mind steady in the light, and we might say in this case of the soul, not necessarily the light of the triad yet, otherwise we'd be in better position, yet, and this is quite a statement, what he is offering to the idea in terms of his equipment and his ability is but a poor thing at best. So when we come up against a great idea, what do we bring to it in terms of the range and the depth of our understanding, of our knowledge, of our mentality? What do we bring to this idea to make sure that we don't get in the way of the descending idea, but actually can understand it and clothe it correctly so that other people can understand it correctly as well? Now, if we bring, well, let's just call this inadequate. Oh, how about that? Equipment. If we bring inadequate equipment to the interpretation of an idea, we're going to get poor results. So, what does he say? This leads to illusion through misinterpretation. Now, you know how it is when you first start studying the Bailey books, you learn a little something. Maybe a few years pass and you're still at that stage. But then years and years pass and your comprehension becomes deeper and the gaps in your knowledge begin to fill in, and you find ways of reinterpreting what at first you misinterpreted. And so perhaps the quality of your mental equipment improves. And when such an idea descends, you are able at least not to make it a poor thing and not to cramp it and distort it and make it inadequate and rob it of its real meaning. You're able to do justice to the descending idea. Now, what about the cause of this? He's so practical here, isn't he? He gives us the cause, he gives us the cure. Cause is an overestimation of one's mental powers. The sin, par excellence, of the mental type is pride, pride of mind, you know, third ray, fifth ray, and even second ray in some respects. And that colors all activities in the early stages. You know, a lot of people who run into the Bailey books, they become mentally proud and they're rather happy that they've gotten this material perhaps before other people have gotten it, and they make a big deal out of that. And DK tells us about that kind of attitude, that it just proves they're not even ready for the material which has been presented. So do we have an adjusted sense of right proportion when we encounter a great idea? Now, I want to say reincarnation is a great idea and a factual process as far as we're concerned in nature. And look at all of the misinterpretations that come when the average mental equipment is presented to the idea of cyclic opportunity or reincarnation. Oh, you're going to come back as a flea or as a fly or as a snake or as a goat, you know. They confuse transmigration with the true reincarnation. They identify themselves with their body, particularly, and with their closest emotions and thoughts. And there's no real soul appreciation of what that great process can mean. So you can find some quite, I mean, you know, the great idea of unity, which is perceived on the plane of harmony, which is the Buddhic plane. Some people are going to bring to that idea the idea of, or the thought of regimentation. Everybody's the same, okay, and should look the same and act the same and all the rest of it. So that will flatten out any kind of real distinction which the expression of the will of God requires. Or let's just say all human beings are created equal. It's a great monadic statement, but people are going to bring to that interpretation, you can't be better than I can, we're all the same in this respect. And if you stick your head up there and you have a better mentality than I do, and thus it seems you do, we just cut your head off and we're all at the same height. Now this is called, I understand that in Australia, maybe New Zealand, I don't know, it's called something like the tall poppy syndrome. If one of those sunflowers or poppies grows above the others due to its own inherent capacity, you just chop it off to make all of the heights of the poppies equal. So let's not overestimate our mental powers. Let's have a certain humility, and let's realize that pride goes before a fall, and that we must not assume that our particular mentality is the highest that can be achieved. There's so many people that think, well, man knows exactly what enlightenment really is on an equal par with a planetary logos or a solar logos or one of the gods. Man just knows as much. Well, that's a ridiculous assessment, but it's based upon mental pride. The cure is the development of a cautious spirit. And I just have to say, Saturn, third ray, caution, balance, these kind of things. True humility, an adjusted sense of right proportion. All of these are factors related to that cautious attitude, which will not permit you to just jump in and think that you have what you need to interpret an idea. Just a certain circumspection about it is required as we approach this vibrant, living thing that we call an idea. Okay, so this is, I think this is number 2, and this is the, this is illusion through wrong interpretation, and the first one was illusion through wrong perception of what we're really dealing with. Idea, abstract thought, concrete thought, ideal, what are we dealing with? And here we have to improve our mental capacity, which if you study with Master DK long enough, that mental capacity is really going to improve. No question about it. Because, he is considered to be the most learned of the masters, at least in this area of astrology and rheology and the meaning of the creative hierarchies and so forth. So it's a great intellectual training, which is not the separative intellect, but the intellect which leads to the ability to perceive the unity which is. So, he's a great teacher, and we're with him and we're learning as we go. Now, it seems to me that I don't really need to go any further right now. I'd like to just concentrate on these different methods or causes of illusion and their cures. I'd just like to, before we get into this discussion, I just like to pause for a minute and ask any one of us to think deeply about it, and whether we do or do not overestimate our mental powers? And are we affected by mental pride, which, maybe a lot of the moon chain types and types from the earlier solar system, they have this problem. Just pause for a minute and think about your own approach. How do you think your estimation of your own mental powers is accurate? Now, remember, it does no good to exaggerate or minimize. A lot of people, oh shucks, I'm not very. They put themselves down. They don't really mean it, but they put themselves down. That's an underestimation. It's equally as bad as I'm equal to anything and my mind is good enough to interpret anything. So let's just pause for a moment as we look at that. And if it would be true that the cure for this attitude, which, it does affect a lot of students of occultism. There are different schools of occultism, and, a lot of people, excuse me, in those different schools, they look at the Bailey students and they say, oh yeah, very mental types and proud of their mind, mental pride, they say. I've heard it said many times, But this cautious spirit that we are supposed to develop, are we developing it? And how would it help in this difficulty, which is mental pride and overestimation of the interpretive power of one's mind? So we always have to realize, that we could be incorrect. And some teachers and all, they just think they have to know everything, which is absurd. The planetary logos doesn't know everything. Far from it. The total logos is just like a little crystal compared to some of the greater lives. So there's a sense of where you stand, truly, a judgment about what you know truly, and in proportion to what might be known, what might be understood. It's a long trip. Each universe is a long haul. Just returning back to the monadic level is just the beginning of being filled with the knowledge and consciousness which is possible, though finite, in any one universe. So I would just say, a cautious spirit and a humble spirit, and your ability to talk to people who know less than you know in a way that really will help them understand is a good indication of whether you have developed that kind of Agni Yoga quality called proportional speech, speaking according to the consciousness of your interlocutor, and maybe just a little beyond it, so as to raise the level. But we know it's possible to develop the know-it-all attitude and to show off before people. I've met a lot of folks like that, and it's always easy to fall into that trap until you see yourself doing it. But the third ray can be very useful because it approaches, once it's finished with the know-it-all stage, it approaches the all questions of knowledge with a wide caution. Let's see if I can, if I were to go somewhere here, and I would go to Esoteric Psychology 1, and I would go to around page 203. And the very first thing he says about the third ray of higher mind, which can be such a prideful problem, is wide views on all abstract questions, sincerity of purpose, clear intellect, capacity for concentration on philosophic studies, patience, caution, ability or absence of the tendency to worry himself or others over trifles. And of course, the seventh ray has a different attitude in that way. So I would, if you haven't reviewed recently the first volume of Esoteric Psychology, the digest of the virtues and the vices of the rays, starting right here on, I don't know, page, roughly page 200 and 200, really, is a wonderful refresher. Now, you may kind of wonder how it is that someone like the second ray can have a problem with love and coldness, indifference to others, contempt of mental limitations in others. But remember, there are different types on every ray, at least 3 types for the major rays, and maybe even 7. And so when you see that the second ray has to develop love, compassion, unselfishness, and energy, you wonder what type he is particularly emphasizing. I think he's writing a lot for the wisdom types on the second ray, and also for the detailed knowledge types on the second ray, which is different from the pure love version. So there's always going to be subcategories, and be cautious in your judgment. These 10 or 15 pages here are just excellent as a refresher when you want to look at the basis of the ray qualities. Okay. Cautious spirit. I think both second ray and third ray can demonstrate this cautious spirit. The first ray, maybe not so much at first. The fourth ray, only after a lot of wounds. The fifth ray, yes. The sixth ray, no. The sixth ray does not generally develop a cautious spirit. The seventh ray, yes. So every ray has its particular virtues which help it solve or fall victim to different types of illusion. And we are now dealing with the mind level. It is not so universally applicable as the emotional level of glamour, but for people of our types who are trying to be disciples of the great teaching, the cultivation of the mentality and all the illusions that we can fall into as we work on that is fair game for our study. Okay, friends, so that's as far as I'm going to go on this, and I'm just...
Michael, you have a comment from Deborah.
Okay.
Or a question.
Okay, very good. Comments are as good as questions, and that's fine, whatever. Well, first of all, I hope Urania got some help there, because she had some trouble being able to see only the startup screen. Okay, now, and welcome, Urania. Thanks for the examples of what an idea is. I would like to know how to distinguish an idea, a law, and a principle. Okay, I think let's, meditate on that. A law is always true. The old saying, no one breaks the law breaks them. Okay, glad you're back, Urania. So it's different from a rule. A rule is a code of action followed, which has led many, many people to success. A law is something intrinsic in the structure of any system, and it is inviolable. You cannot break a law. A law is the will of a higher being, and it's a formulated and sustained will. Now, the expression of this will is usually based upon a sevenfold, threefold structure of that higher being. And a principle is an aspect of a being which is indispensable. You cannot do without it. You cannot do without the will, without love, without intelligence, without, it depends on what the being is. As a matter of fact, what I would suggest, Deborah, is to go to a treatise on cosmic fire, and I'll take us right there right now. And go to page 259, roughly. Let's see if I'm more or less correct. And all the different principles are listed there depending on the context. 259 and 260. So here is a series of principles. Now it all depends about the level at which you start. The monad, the threefold triad, the body egoic, the threefold lower nature, the quaternary. All of these are aspects of the structure of a being which are indispensable depending upon how you are viewing that being. But this is not the only notation. This is not the only tabulation. We have principles looked at from a very, very high level. Monad, that's pure spirit. The monadic trinity, Atma Buddhi Manas. The body egoic, and then the lower quaternary. Okay, that's one. But we also have, we begin from the atmic plane and can find these constituents of the being that you simply must have if the being is to actually exist. So now we have Atma Buddhi Manas as the beginning. That's our perspective at the moment. And then, let's see, what else do we have? 3 principles in the triad, the two synthesizing principles on the plane of the monad make 5 principles, which give the key to HPB's numbering in certain places. This is a very interesting section of the book, and it shows that 7 principles, 5 principles, you can look at man or any entity according to these different numbers. And he goes all the way through it, 5 and 7. And here's another way to look at it. And here, yeah, this is something even higher, perhaps. Here's another one that ends with Atma but begins with the etheric body. These are different ways of looking at the principles or the utterly necessary constituents of any being, such as man, depending upon our point of view. So read those 10 pages or so here, and we will see what are considered to be vehicles and principles and necessary constituents. Now here's one that leaves out the etheric physical altogether. There's the astral vehicle, the Kama Manas, higher Manas, Buddhi, Atma, and monadic. It all depends on your perspective. And in this particular case, the 7-fold enumeration does not include the realm of manifestation on the dense physical or etheric. It's just subjective. And on we go. If you want to go to Makara and find the approximate pages there, several years ago, I wrote a fairly detailed analysis of the whole book, basically, up to about the last 100 pages, after which I just started talking the book. But if you find this page 260 and then go on to about page 270, you will see how I broke down these different principles and how I looked at them and tried to describe them, and you might find them useful. Up to page 269, 270, I've never seen a more complete description by DK of the possible ways of looking at utterly necessary aspects of the individual, whether that being is man or something greater, depending on the perspective. So it's a definitely indispensable part of the being you are studying. That's what a principle is. Now, based upon those principles, the will comes forward and says, these principles have to be reflected in the lower worlds. And so we establish great thoughts which are completely rigid in a way, and they cannot be violated because they preserve the expression of the principles. And those are called the laws. And then I already distinguished between those and rules, okay? Now, there was one more, I'm sorry, there was one more factor here. All I gotta do is find it. Right, okay, come on now, go to, oh, it's right down here at the bottom. An idea. Well, an idea is an emanatory being coming from one of the higher principles of the being concerned, and this emanatory being ensures that at the right time, the principle involved will be expressed in manifestation. So an idea is really an archetype found within the purpose of a great entity, And if the idea is followed according to a plan and in a timely manner, the different aspects of the archetype will be expressed in manifestation in the right way. There may be, well, a purpose may involve the will, it may involve love, it may involve intelligence, it may involve harmony, it probably involves all the Ray characteristics. So if you fasten on to an archetype, which is how the divine purpose is finally to look, ideas are the methods of bringing that archetype forward step by step so that it can truly manifest in the world of becoming the way it does in the world of being. So I would just, take that for what it's worth, and this will be available to you. Just if you want to be included on some of the lists that I'm intending to make, just write me and give me your email, and I'll make sure that you receive some of these videos in a way that you will actually receive them and won't be looking for them forever. Okay, so Deborah, that's the best I can do for the moment. Between the archetype, the idea, the principle, the law, the rule, those are all factors which are related to each other. Maybe, I don't know whether to say the principle is the highest type of thing or whether the archetype is the highest type of thing, but the law is meant to protect the archetype as it comes into manifestation, and all archetypes coming into manifestation involve somehow the expression of the 5 or 3 or 7 principles which are absolutely indispensable parts of the being in question. Now, I realize that what I've proposed here, it could take a long time to sort it all out and everything, but if you listen to it again, maybe something of use will come to you in that. Okay, so that's that. Now, let's see. Is there anybody else? Now, let's see. No, I think we did Urania's. Yeah, you're good. You're back in. And. Okay, and anybody on the staff wish to speak or ask a question or make a comment? Here's something here. Frida, can you help us distinguish between the 3 items under wrong perception? I think you did idea and ideal, but how about idea and thought form and intuitive concept and mental concept? Well, maybe not all of these are entirely different. First of all, an idea comes from, let's look at the map, okay? An idea descends from an area of vibration in the cosmic etheric body of the entity involved. Let's call it a human being or even a planetary logos, the Buddhic realm. Ideas come from realms no lower than the Buddhic realm. And there's a type of matter that we find on the Buddhic realm and African realm, and they're all unique. I think, did he say, I'm trying to remember, that the atoms found on the Buddhic plane take the shape of a figure 8, which makes a lot of sense considering the idea of the Christ as the number 8 and going above and below in an intuitive manner. The 8 is the complete circulation of the Antakarana. And when I ran into an old chart from some of those students that studied directly with the Tibetan, one of them had created a Antakarana chart, and all of the circulation were figure 8s. with a wider and higher always reach. So ideas will come from all kinds of levels above the Buddhic plane because they are archetypal formulations of that which must be manifested within the world of becoming. In a way, let's consider Buddhic, Atmic, Monadic, and Logoic, as far as the cosmic physical plane is concerned, let's consider it the world of being. Now, the ideas or incorporeal, formalized relationships of energy have to be manifested in form in the lower 21 subplanes. So these lower 21 subplanes are the dense physical body of the solar logos. And even though, excuse me, some of them are quite abstract, they are dense compared with the incorporeal realm of true ideas. And let's remember that what we call an idea is still dense when we consider that the true ideas, let's see if I can get this properly done. The true ideas may be formulating up here on the cosmic Buddhic level and beyond. Okay, so even what we call ideas on our cosmic etheric planes, which are not corporeal in the sense of form, are corporeal when you compare them with cosmic ideas, which are found on these cosmic planes above or at a higher rate of vibration. If we can speak in that kind of language, a higher rate of vibration than what can be found on the cosmic physical plane. So, so it all depends. Okay, the idea comes from the Buddhic plane and beyond. The ideal is a formulation which, let's see if I can get this. No, it's the other way around. Move it over here. The ideal is a formulation of the concrete mind and the astral vehicle. The concrete mind gives form, a dense form to the idea, and when that particular form is motivated towards manifestation or towards realization or towards some kind of appearance, we call it an ideal. So the ideal is a combination, to me anyway, of lower mind and the fuel of a desire found on the astral plane. It's altogether a lower thing than an idea because it's found in the dense physical vehicles of the solar logos, and if it's found on the lower 18 subplanes, it's found in the dense physical vehicle of the planetary logos. Okay, now, what about thought form? Well, there are abstract thought forms. They are forms, but they have much more to do with what's called like blueprints and abstract relations, which leave out a lot of the formal details. One abstract thought can contain many, many, many formal details as found on the plane of the concrete mind. So it's still a form compared to the intuitive idea, which is relatively incorporeal, but it is abstract on the level of higher mind when comparing it to the denser, more perceptible forms which are found on the concrete levels of mind. And usually when we talk about thought forms, we're talking about forms that are quite tangible relatively and have clear outlines and so forth, and are found on the lower levels of the mental plane, subplanes 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then the last thing you asked about, what's the difference between an intuitive and a mental concept? And I would just say the intuitive concept. Well, the word concept is difficult because in a way the whole idea is given to you all at once under the influence of Uranus. And then you take the planet Saturn and you take that simultaneous presentation and you break it out sequentially in time and space under Saturn using sequence. And that is more the mental concept, which is never as complete as the entire simultaneous presentation of the idea. Every mental concept is a little bit, or quite a bit, limited compared to the holism of the idea, which contains many sequential mental concepts. So the difference in the power, the scope, the quality of a mental concept and an intuitive idea, and if you want to use the word, when you grasp an idea, maybe you can call it a concept, you grasp it all at once. So in that way, you can consider it a concept, but it is not the same as a formal presentation in time and space of all that that higher idea stands for. So I'd much rather, some people will work from a concept inductively and they will make their way towards the aha of the intuitive idea, or if we want to call it intuitive grasping. Other people will get hit by the intuition and by the idea in pure form and will clothe that idea first in abstract mental matter and then make it very applicable and practical and concrete and clothe it in dense mental matter. And that would be a concrete-minded concept. So there's three things involved. There's the idea of the Buddhic plane, the abstract concept of the higher mental and abstract mental plane, and then the concrete concept or form of the lower mental plane. I guess those, for the moment, unless I was writing some kind of, thing with ultra discriminative words, that's the best I can do for the moment, and I hope it was useful to you. Okay, excuse me. I have to see where we are here. All right, so are there any, let's see, I just want to make sure, any other things that want to be said or asked? You understand, this is a subtle area. So many of us have labored for lives in Kama Manus, which is an area of concrete mental thought forms motivated by some kind of desire. It's quite concrete and it's in the dense physical body of our planetary logos and so forth. Well, now we're building the Antakarana. Now in this diagram, let's see, whoop, that's a good one. In this diagram, this is, here is a triangular picture of the Antakarana, and no longer are we just working on the four mental subplanes dealing with concrete thoughts. We're actually reaching into the higher mind towards its center, and the very first phase of building the Antakarana, which leads to increasing degrees of soul infusion, is underway. And the decay, and here is, for the abstract thinker, there's another way of bridging from higher mind towards abstract mind, and that's this aspect of the triangle. And decay has taught us specifically occult and rather first ray method. of reaching from our concrete mentality into the abstract blueprint mentality of the abstract mind. So this is what we're ready for now, if we will work at it, and not just to stay down here in the very limiting realms of the dense physical body of the planetary logos. We're ready for the Antikarana in its three different phases. And DK has spent a lot more time actually dealing with phase one, where we're learning how to contact the soul, and phase three, I might say, where we're learning how to send forth a rapier-like alignment on a bridge of sevenfold light from the mental unit to the monastic permanent atom. And as far as this other method goes, it's sort of the philosophical third ray method. You think about the abstract world and your mind becomes ever more inclusive of abstract relations until you can finally work on the highest level of the abstract mind, or the highest level of the higher mind. So we're ready for this now, and that's our goal, and it will lead us into the triad, toward the monad, into the realm of being, and into the realm of will. Okay. Anything else before we have our meditation? Michael, or BL, did I leave anybody out?
I don't see anything else.
Okay, BL, great, thank you. Okay, very good. Well, look, you know, we'll all be masters someday. DK says that in the coming age and beyond, a large number of fifth degree initiates will be required. He didn't use the word master, he used fifth degree initiates. Many of us are from the moon chain or the earlier solar system, not all. There are some who have moved very, very fast, and they are members of the hierarchy, even though they are members of the, you know, first Earth humanity. They're still members of the hierarchy, having moved so fast along the love wisdom line, particularly. But now the time has come, the time of achievement for those who are along the line of intelligence, the third and the fifth ray types, and then in the next root race, a lot of second ray types, and in the following root race, or round maybe, the first ray monadic types. So this is a day of opportunity. We have a master that is presenting great teaching in 3 installments. The third is coming quite soon, as I've often emphasized. He's a very mentally capable master, and he's training us in the real development of the mind, the abstract mind, the intuitive mind, so that 3 minds indeed in us can unite, okay? So we take advantage of that, and we learn how deliberately and purposefully to penetrate into the higher worlds, and not just catch as catch can. It happened to me one fine day. I had a great feeling, and the next thing you know, I had a great intuition. Okay, that's kind of happenstance. It may happen or it may not. We want the science of the Antikarana. We want the science of the penetration into the monad, and its personality projection, the spiritual triad. And this is possible to develop, and DK has already gotten us started in doing that, and let's see what's going to be presented in the next teaching. You know, that's all come back, and some of you will be, you know, still in the body when that teaching is really flourishing. And let's learn that, the triple series of bridging treatises towards the true wisdom of the New Age. That's what he's involved giving now, and he needs those who will assimilate it. Okay, and that's where we come in. We must be very serious about our assimilation of what he has given. Okay, anybody else? And otherwise, we'll go on to our meditation.
Nope, I don't see anything.
Okay, Bill, thank you. Good. Okay, and Tuya, you are there somewhere. Can you hear me? I think so, maybe. Okay, yeah, okay. We have to leave it in a day, you know, so we have a lot of work to do here too after a number of weeks. Anyway, let's begin. Okay, let's see, BL and Michael, is the transmission coming through fairly steadily, or are there a lot of cuts?
I've gotten mine really good.
Okay, it just depends on where you are, you know, depends on where you are. Right here in the house, we're getting some cuts, but okay.
It's worked fine on my end.
Okay, well, you're far enough away. All right. Yeah, I'll take care of it. All right, friends, here we go. We're going to try to help humanity get out of this very, very limiting stage where the personality narcissistically seems to be of the greatest importance. And one is blind to even the first phases of contacting the higher of the pairs of opposites, namely consciousness on the higher mental plane and what we normally call the soul. So we really do need something that goes beyond this glamour of personality and this desire to see a personality fulfilled and happy. Okay, it's not the joy of the soul and it's not the bliss of the monad. Nothing wrong with a happy personality as long as it's not sacrificing the higher perceptions in order to maintain its own very limited prerogatives. So I'm talking about our leaders and how many of them think that the sun rises and sets upon their well-being. So let's have some silence at first. Not the full 10 minutes in this case, but some silence in which we all come together in consciousness. We are like one group instrument, and we offer ourselves to assist hierarchy in the dissipation of the many distortions, veils, clouds, mists, fogs, you know, these things that prevent the true perception of reality and they emanate from the astral plane. We offer ourselves for that type of work. And we are mindful that it's not easy work, and there's even some dangers connected with it. And some of DK's students fell victim to certain glamours, and a lot of repair work had to be done because they weren't cautious enough as they approached this work. So we'll use the protective formula, which involves what he calls the cross of divinity, forehead to the center of the chest and the two eyes, and we'll visualize the illumination of that cross, and that's individually and for the group as a whole. So we visualize as we pronounce the words. And you can do that, you're on mute, you can speak out loud where you are. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point, I never move. So the cross of protection is there with us. And, it helps us see with the eyes of the heart, which will reveal pure reason, and it will keep us away from the distortions which are so easily found when the out of control emotions link up with limited, narrow thought forms. So just be aware that this cross of light is burning, is shining, is protecting the whole group and each member individually. Now the preparatory stage where we have the three lights, excuse me, become as one light. So we lift the light of matter, especially the etheric physical light. We lift it onto the lower mental plane where we encounter the light of reasoning and logic and the usual ways that the concrete mind pursues the revelation of greater light. So the vital light of matter rising up, touching the mental level, normal mental level, maybe the fourth subplane there, and the clear thinking ability is the second light, and these two lights we visualize as joining. And then we pull into this union of two, a third, and we imagine or touch somehow the light of the soul. And often when you think of a position above your head, it becomes easier to touch that kind of soul light. we find ourselves thinking about soul contact, which is becoming a reality to us. And we're going to bring down that soul light found in the causal body. It's partially from the solar angel and partially from the monad. And we bring it down imaginatively and merge it with the two other forms of light. So the light of the soul, mental light, and the vital light of matter, all merged into one. And out of that triple light, our searchlight will be generated. So we say together, point number 4 here, followed by the sacred word. The light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. So we're ready now to project our beam, revelatory beam, and also a beam which is like a weapon against glamour, or assists with the dissipation of glamour. We're ready to project that beam like a great searchlight onto the astral plane. So we see that beam go forth for each one of us and joining together to make the group beam onto the astral plane, a brilliant beam of maybe spiralized light like the horn of a unicorn. And that can be an effective instrument to get rid of the veils, clouds, fogs, mists, distortions, especially when we use this in the group manner. So we use now the formula, visualizing the beam forth on the astral plane, and we say, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So that beam is out there or in there, depending on how you look at it. The astral and mental worlds are still quite objective relative to the true subjectivity of the soul. And the astral plane, rather than being some kind of clear and lucid experience, can look a lot more like a hissing mass of gray fog. So we have to somehow clarify all that and bring the true light into it, so no more distortions can corrupt our perception of reality. Nations can be swept by glamours for years and reality utterly lost to sight. The glamour becomes the motivating energy, and reality is no part of the consideration. So we have to make sure that when we find those situations, we help to dissipate the causes of them and help to restore people's consciousness to a true sanity. Okay. Now we want to strengthen our beam, invoking the spiritual will, from, well, the will goes all the way up, but from practical purposes, from the monad to Atma, to the jewel in the lotus, to the synthesis petals and sacrifice petals and the will petals of the other two groups of petals, and into the head center and base of the spine. We want to strengthen that beam. So, so it really can do its job in the brilliance of light and with the strength of spiritual will. So we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And our goal, the dissipation of this very limiting glamour of personality, which demonstrates within the field of consciousness a huge personal center, which distorts the proportional understanding of many other factors. The old saying, the world revolves around me. And there are just too many leaders who have not developed psychologically sufficiently to go beyond that very self-centered, personality-centered attitude. Think about what this glamour of personality has contributed to the difficulties which humanity is facing. Think about our environmental crisis and how even one nation can hold back the progress of the many. All finally motivated by personal desires which are blind to the greater welfare. Think about the personal ideals, which are very selfish and ultimately do not take into consideration the welfare of the greater number. It's all based on a lack of sharing, which leads to war and corrupt politics, corrupt religion. All of that has to be cleaned up, straightened out before the Christ can appear on that great wave of expectation. So what has this glamour of personality taken away from human progress? Master Mori once said that whoever is for the common weal, W-E-A-L, or the common welfare, is with us. So how many leaders do we know that are for the welfare of humanity and try to place their nation properly within the effort to raise all of humanity? They can't do that if they are afflicted by their own self-importance. So we can only hope that Master Moria, who works with leaders of nations and large groups, succeeds in inspiring the right kind of leaders who have the vision of the welfare of humanity in mind first, and not that nationalism, which is nothing more than egotism at a national level. So let us then use the words of power. And then we'll go into 5 minutes of silence where we, with intensity of purpose and in our own way, but visualizing the group, of course, penetrate into this glamour of personality and try to produce its weakening and its dissipation. So the power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of personality, personal self-interest, personal centralization, of which decentralization is the only hope, prevents the appearance of the glamour of personality. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of personality from affecting humanity. We really have to learn to see beyond our own little aura, so to speak. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of personality. So now, as we visualize that light, our group beam, penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and dissipation, we'll have 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose, and we will see the work proceeding. 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose as we work with the implications of the words of power. And we can repeat these words of power in relation to this glamour, which prevent the isolation of separativeness and help us to see things in proportion and give us care about the other and the others rather than just about our own little personal self. So we will withdraw our beam for the moment back onto the mental plane. The triple light is one, and shut off that beam for the moment to reawaken it when we need it. And of course, we have our own personal work to do in relation to our personal glamours. As we continue to read through the book, we will reach that section also concerning the personal work which we must accomplish. So we've done something, and mentally, emotionally, physically, we'll sound the Om to confirm that something constructive, something of value, something serving the light of the soul, and not all of the entanglement of unillumined form, something serving the light of the soul has been accomplished. And a real instrument serving the light, love, and sacrificial will of the soul is being created. So friends, thank you for being here, meditating together like this. We have in our Ask program, one more program this week. Tomorrow we'll deal with the evocation of the soul of nations and your own nation. Think about that particularly. And when the causal body of any particular nation reaches a certain degree of fullness and radiance and beauty, then that nation can have its own esoteric school. And the hierarchy comes that much closer to influencing the spiritual progress of the nation. So that will be done with our YouTube link, which certainly all of you should have by this time. But if not, just write to me or to BL or to Joe Waltz or to Michael Stacy, and we'll provide you with that YouTube link. Hopefully free, relatively free of the chirping, electrical chirping of birds. Okay, all the best, and lovely to see you here. Thanks for joining us, and lots of love and goodwill and wishes towards your spiritual progress, which will help everybody around you progress. Okay. Many blessings, many blessings. We'll see you soon.